to Solutions with Courtney Anderson, and I am Courtney Anderson. I am your host and guide for the show today, as always. And our show today is part two, a two-part episode, and it is entitled The Client Experience Employee: How it Transforms Careers. As I shared, this is part two of a two-part show, so I really encourage you to listen to part one if you haven't, because it explains, I think, a lot of the background, this entire concept of what is the client experience? How is it going to transform my career? What's going on? And of course, this is a show that's part of our Joyful Art of Business series, and that's all about this concept that I just have to be more expansive in my assessment of whether or not I'm professionally surpassing my goals, and I have to include the aspect of whether or not I'm getting an emotional return on investment that's positive, and I just label that joy. And in part one, I spent some time trying to lay a foundation of kind of that I was frustrated historically, going out providing dispute resolution, which is where I sit down and try to resolve problems between people, um, you know, outside of court, outside of the legal system, outside of filing lawsuits, or if you filed a lawsuit outside of going to trial, we try to resolve it faster, cheaper, better, hopefully. And I talked about my experiences doing that as a mediator and arbitrator. And I also shared that sometimes doing corporate education programs or doing keynotes, I've encountered some people who've been really, 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 really angry, bitter, enraged, um, just not happy about their employer, and how I at first didn't understand why someone would get so emotionally upset about what I did refer to in part one as, it's just a job. Like, I mean, why are you so hurt? And then I started to notice over the years that the words that people used as employees, and they were venting and sharing with me, what they said was wrong with their employer, it sounded so similar. In a lot of ways, it would be exactly similar to what I would hear when I worked with people who were breaking up with families. So typically, divorces or child custody issues or probate, which I didn't mention earlier. And probate's a family, but someone has passed away. And now all of the pain and unmet needs and disappointment, they all come just rushing forward. And people in probate cases will literally go in court and get on a stand, and so they're in a courtroom, there's a judge, people taking a record, it's public, and they will relive things that happened 40, 50 years ago. But the core of it is sort of a mommy didn't love me enough, or daddy loved you more, and people just can't digest and process that emotional pain. It's so raw. And then when someone dies, of course, now we're all fighting. And they use the courts again to kind of get that out, that pain. And then so when, so it could be a family, spouses or partners. It could be just a larger family, and someone's died. And it's just, it's emotionally wrenching to be working in these cases, because, it triggers all my own individual, experiences and histories. And it's just, how do you help? I can give you the answer to what the law says. I can tell you what might be the best thing to do financially. I can give you an assessment of, in terms of, probabilities, what's most likely, to occur if you open door one, open door two, open door three. I can tell you that. But how do I solve, pain? How do you address loneliness, disappointment, neglect? I mean, I don't have the answer to that. And one of the things that started to cause me concern in the frustration was that when I do corporate education, when I do keynote speaking, programs like this, part of the reason I love all of this is because it gives me structure. I love fixing things, right? I'm just owning my own stuff. And so as someone who likes to fix things, then I like having a framework that we can fix it. So a legal framework, an accounting framework, a business framework. Tell me what your sales were. Show me your data. It gives me somewhere to make decisions, and I have something objective I can look at. The challenge when we leave that area we move over into completely emotional, visceral reactions, I don't have a framework. So if someone is yelling at me that their employer is selfish and doesn't care about them and has disrespected them, okay, I mean, what's the framework for that? What's the measurement for respect and disrespect? It doesn't exist. And a lot of programs, when we talk about respect, which is the core of so much, right, at work and in life, my training and advice has always been don't define respect as you treat people the way that they want, because that'll fail. Unless they, of course, are exactly like you. Um, you respect is you treat people the way that they want. And that's hard for most of us to do because A, it requires you to figure out what that is, or just simply ask them politely, which most people don't for some reason want to do. And then it also requires you continually suppressing what you want, how you feel, what you would want, and substituting what the other person wants, which is not, when it's not the same thing, there's some dissonance to that, because you sort of feel like, well, no, you should want this. And the person's like telling you, like, no, you're not listening to me. I want this. And you gotta, if you want to be respectful, you gotta understand that you gotta give them what they want, not what you want, because they're not you, they're them, right? Okay. So, when we looked at our client experience part one, I was sharing that the pain, the emotional pain that people have shared, that they feel that, that this employer has just done these awful, horrible emotional things to them, right? They don't listen to them. They don't care about them. They unilaterally make decisions without them. They don't appreciate them. And then I was sharing that one of the things that's so interesting is that you do get fantastically grounded, competent, practical ideas from employees, and they get so angry emotionally, and they start saying, it doesn't even matter, I'm fed up, I can't take it anymore, I just care, I wish I didn't care. And it's sad, and it's so similar to when I've done mediations for people, and their families are you know ending, and people will say about their partners or spouses, um it just hurts. I wanted it to be right. I wanted our family to make it, and they just don't seem to care. They ignore me. They they hurt me. They disrespect me. They diminish my input. And it's so similar emotionally. It's so painful. And so I started to share that, in a very, very broad and probably somewhat clumsy way, that part of the challenge, I think, with the work situation is that it's changed dramatically so quickly. In other words, 50 years ago, we would have had a totally different situation. We would have described things so differently about work. 50 years ago, everywhere in the world, work was dramatically different, and certainly in the United States, it was incredibly different. 50 years ago in the US, I wouldn't have been able to do the jobs I do the way I do them. Um, Partially the technology, but bigger than that, there were so many different cultural and societal issues, and there were things about gender and ethnicity, and that really severely impacted people's ability to to obtain employment, and to be given opportunities to demonstrate what they can do intellectually or creatively or anything else. I mean, that's real. And you've had just a massive amount of change in a short amount of time. And for people who were working, before these changes started to get implemented, and they're still working now, I think sometimes I really do. I always empathize with people. It's the ability to put yourself in their shoes and just sort of try to think through things to the best of your understanding from their perspective. It has to be hard for people who are, maybe in their 70s now, and were working, 50 years ago when they were in their 20s, and how much things have changed. Just the world's changed. The technology is incredibly different. The expectations socially, professionally, who's in the workforce, how work decisions are made. I mean, all of this has changed so much. It's got to be, um, just hard to absorb. And perhaps if I were, knock on wood, fortunate enough to live to be in my 70s, how different would it be then? I don't, none of us know yet. Maybe I find myself just unable to cope and process. Um, but that's something that, we're all alive, and we're either going to live long enough to experience, or we should again have the empathy to understand people who do struggle sometimes because things have changed. One of the things in part one of this show I was talking about is that historically there wasn't a collective consensus that the individual human had the right to control their own labor. We had slavery throughout all of human history in all different parts of our geographic experience and throughout our timeline in history, up until very recently and up until modern day. We unfortunately continue to have people who are held illegally in most instances. Most parts of the world, it's now a crime to enslave someone and not allow them to have the freedom to leave a job and to control their own labor. And exploitation is rampant, right? We still have problems, the same problems we've had all along: child labor, exploitation of people who might have um, disabilities and not fully understand exactly what their rights are. Disenfranchised groups all around the world. There's always different groups in every different part of the world, but the disenfranchised group that doesn't have the political power or the cultural power or stereotypes in a society may feel, hey, those people, whoever they are, they have tons of different labels. They're not the most desirable, or maybe they're the undesirable. And so we'll not give them professional opportunities. All this is still happening. And it happens against a backdrop of part of what I was trying to clarify at the end of part one of this show is that with the freedom for me to control my destiny, like right now, and I used to talk to my grandparents, they're all deceased now, but, you know, and try to talk to them and understand when I was younger how different it was. I came along after in the timeline in the U.S. where the laws had changed, and I had the legal right to go out and apply for any job that I was qualified for. Not that I'd be guaranteed to be hired, but they were supposed to be making decisions based on my qualifications and not on my gender and not on my ethnicity or color or religion or anything like that. And that's a totally different world. And I did have the opportunity to talk to my grandparents, and to some extent even other relatives who were younger who didn't have those same options. And it's there's a sort of the guilt that I sometimes am just painfully aware of. I just got lucky that I was born when I was born, and that I have had opportunities that other people who are who were much smarter than I am, and certainly as deserving, just didn't have because they were born in a different time. And I'm grateful for my opportunities, which is one of the reasons why when I do all these programs and people are like, "Why are you so passionate? Why are you so out there?" Part of it is I get totally understand this is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity a lot of fantastic people haven't had just because they just didn't come along at the right time. And the laws didn't allow them, and society didn't allow it. And we could talk about all different types of groups all over the world. So I'm aware that I got a good shot, and I just got lucky at that. And I'm running with it. I'm going to run with it, and I'm going to go to every educational opportunity that exists. And I'm going to think to myself, what dreams do I have, and what goals can I surpass? And I'm going to get out there and just go as big as I want to, because I understand that this is a rare opportunity, and I am grateful. But at times, I said, I also feel some guilt. And I don't think anything's negative with that, but I think it's important to acknowledge it. So all of that actually is part of the reason why I was frustrated when employees start sharing all this pain with me, and they're so angry and hurt, and I can't figure out how to solve problems though if it's just pain. I can't take away people's pain. I can listen to it. I can, if they'll give me something that's actionable, that's related to something in real life that I have some power over, I will try to fix it. But I can't fix past wrongs. I can't take away disappointment and hurt. I just can't. No one can. The person can. You can, that's what all of, professional development and a lot of therapy and a lot of these types of programs are all about, is you need to get really aggressive with yourself. But it's hard for me when I'm, an attorney or even mediator or corporate trainer or, professor, whatever. Like I can't undo all of that past. But I can, and I did come up with the idea of the client experience employee, which is from now going forward, how can we fix it? I cannot go to employers and make a rational argument that if they have employees who are at will, in the US, that basically is the concept that the person has the right to quit the job at any time. They don't have to give you notice, they don't have to give you a reason. Okay, so it's employment at will. Other parts of the world, most other parts of the world have something similar. The US is an anomaly in some ways, and sort of the comprehensive safety nets and policies that are in place. But in general, this sort of works the same. We talked about this idea coming from a history as humans of enslaving other people and exploitation and a lot of just not really egalitarian experiences that we all humans share. And we've moved into this new idea, this new enlightened idea that people individually have the right, all kinds of different people, even now we're just way, in terms of history, we're just way out there, right? All different types of women, different genders, different ethnicities or religions or colors or experiences or tribes, or, we're just really getting out there with this kind of idea that we all inherently have the equal value as a human, and that means we should have opportunity. We're not going to get the same outcomes because we're all different, right? So I'm not going to be a professional basketball player because I don't have any basketball talent. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to get opportunities that fit my skills and interests and passions. And so when we change things and we are in this situation where I have control over my labor, I can quit. You can't force me to work here forever, right? I'm not an indentured servant. That kind of changes the whole dynamic where the employer says, okay, if the employee can just quit, right? They don't have to stay here. That means then that I'm going to also have less guarantees. And that's a lot of what you see, the friction all over the world in different societies that grapple with this, right? Because if you used to have this concept that you got a job and you worked that job, from the time you were, a young adult until you were kind of too old or ready to retire, and that's kind of what you did. You had that one job, you worked that job, and then when you couldn't work or didn't want to work anymore, if you lived long enough, which is also a very recent situation, you quote retired, and then that was it. That's changed dramatically. And so if I'm an employee and I can just quit when I want to, which people do, and you see different data from different generations, the younger the person is and the more that they've come into maturity in a society where they believed that they were equal. They believed it. It wasn't like some sort of theory, but it was like, no, in practice, I have equal rights. I can do what I want and apply where I want and be what I want and all of that. It changes dynamics incredibly because people have a different value they place on themselves, and they also have a different way of looking at things. They're not going to just tolerate a situation that they think is horrible and awful. They're not going to, because they feel like I can go somewhere else. And they can. So when that happens, the employer starts to say, okay, well, I'm not agreeing to guaranteed lifetime employment either. Part of it is that it's hard for me to be flexible. And the other part of it is with the globalization, everybody's got different competitors. Who would have ever thought, that you have a little business in one part of the world, you have to worry about some competitor on the other side of the globe. Really? But you do now. And the technology is just mind-boggling how it's changing costs and barriers to entry in different industries. It's just everything. It's great because you see all this innovation, you see all this entrepreneurial excitement, all of the stuff that I love, and it makes me happy and excited. But you also see just incredible insecurity. Any business, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Governments don't know. There's just instability. People don't just sit and accept whatever you give them any longer. A lot of people think, well, I have rights, and whether it's at work, in a romantic relationship, or in a society at large, they say, I'm not going to take this. I don't have to. And they're less tolerant. So it works both ways. When I encounter the employees who are really hurt and they feel that they're disrespected, not listened to, et cetera, it reminds me, and it often is the same language people use when they're family relationships, whether it was a romantic spouse or partner or some other family member that they felt they weren't loved enough or cared enough about. My argument is that that's not appropriate at work. It's work. And I think the healthiest thing potentially to explore would be, don't look at the employer as this sort of spouse relationship where you're gonna get all these unmet needs. You're emotional, you're psychological, your attention, your approval. Look at it as a job. And I think an easier way to say it is look at it as a client. So you are an employee and you have all kinds of rights and obligations as an employee. But I think it would be helpful to just try looking at your employer as your client. And so here's some examples. Okay, so let's say somebody works in retail, and I worked in retail when I was a young person, and in a minimum wage job at like a mall. And so when someone comes in the retail store and I'm just a worker, right? Like I don't control anything. I am an employee, and at that point I was a minimum wage, lowest level, nothing, no power employee. And so someone might come and be trying on, outfits. Maybe they're trying on different shirts, and the person, sometimes they'll ask people at the store, what do you think of this one? Should I try, do you think I should get this one or the other one? And they'll show you different outfits. And then if I were to say to them, oh, well, I think maybe you should get the second outfit. It seems like it, fit you better and it just looked better. If they turn around to me and say, what? I don't want that. I'm going to get the first outfit. And you might be thinking, well, the first outfit was really tight. They barely could, get it on. And the person says, well, you know what? I'm gonna lose weight and it's gonna fit perfectly in a little bit, and I'm gonna put this on anyway. And that's what they buy. I don't take that personally. I'm not hysterically upset that they ignored my feelings and didn't care about me, and I was just trying to help them and all this kind of stuff. I just think, hey, I was paid to be here at this store. And when people came in and had, wanted to buy something, I was supposed to ask you how if I could help you. I was going to try to help you, and then I was going to, facilitate you paying for your thing and leaving. That's my job. And that's what I gave. I don't get personally hurt and offended and upset and hysterical if somebody, is a client or a customer and they don't take my advice. All right, then maybe you bought the pair of pants I told you in my professional advice was not a good idea because it looked too tight, and you went out and bought those pants, and you went out the next day wearing them and they were too tight, and they split on you in public, and you were embarrassed because everybody saw that your pants split. But that's your choice. I don't feel responsibility for that. I can't make the adult customer do anything. It's their life. They're going to buy the pants they want. And, I would think if I'm a medical doctor and I have a patient and I'm like, hey, you really need to stop smoking. Here's why. Let's look at these x-ray results. Let's talk about, the reality of the consequences most likely. And the person ignores me. Oh, whatever. I'm going to go out and do what I want. And they keep smoking. Okay. If they do develop some sort of, really bad negative health outcome, is that my fault? Again, I'm not trying to be offensive, but it's somewhat similar, right? Just like I'm at the mall, I'm paid for my time and my advice. I'm a physician, I'm paid for my time and my advice. As a lawyer, this I dealt with so much early in my career. I'd be up here trying to tell somebody, hey, you really need to listen to me. Don't violate the order that you have right now in your child custody. I'm begging you. If you don't do what you're supposed to, and we go back to court later on this, it's going to be horrible. The judge is going to rule against you. You're going to lose. And I would tell people like explicit. I'd even write it down. And they sometimes they nod their head, oh yeah, I totally understand, and they go out and do exactly what I said not to do, and then they have horrible outcomes that I had predicted. I don't take that to it's not my fault. They're an adult. I told them my advice. I gave them my time and my professional advice, and they ignored it. Okay. It's their lives. I'm hurt that other people hurt themselves at a deep emotional level. Of course, I want everybody to surpass their goals. That's why I do the work that I do now. But I can't own everybody else's choices. And if you look at your employer as a client, it takes away all this other stuff. If they want to ruin the organization and run it into the ground and make horrible choices, you know what? You've advised them. You gave them your time. You gave them some potential solutions. They ignored it. And once they do that the first time as an employee, right? So you're an employee, you're positive. Hey, here's some of my ideas. I'm really concerned. I care greatly about our organization, or, whether we're a government agency or a private sector entity, or we're a volunteer organization, right? Trying to do good in society. I'm trying to help. The moment whoever's in power at that organization shows you through their behavior that they're not going to accept the advice you gave and follow through, and they're going to do other things or ignore things, and they're bad outcomes, it's the same thing as that person in the store. It's the same thing as that person not listening to your advice that's a client or a customer or a patient. That's their choice. Emotionally, I think it might be healthy for some people as employees to understand, yes, you're talented and gifted and have great ideas. If there is a relationship that works between you and an employee, just because it works today doesn't mean it's going to work forever. I mean, you and an employer. And if you will at some level disconnect yourself from the entity, meaning it's their organization. Who's they? Whoever's in charge. Whoever it is that is the one that you feel disrespects you, doesn't listen to you, whoever that is, somebody somewhere made a decision to let those people be in charge. I don't know who or why. Does it matter? I can't change it. And you can't change it by just being hysterically upset and hurt and angry. You're not helping anything. And mostly you're hurting yourself. You know, every time I go to the dentist, I listen to the dental hygienist and the dentist talk to other, people that are there getting their dental cleaning and giving all the advice about, brushing and flossing. And, it's obvious some people aren't doing what they're supposed to. The dentist and the dental hygienist and the admin person there shouldn't just fall out on the floor crying hysterically. Why don't they listen to me? They don't care about me. I'm trying to save their dental health. Well, yes, you are, but they understand I can't control these people. They're going to do what they do. And I am begging you. If you struggle with this and you just can't stand it, the job, why don't they listen? Why do they disrespect you? Look, once it's out there in every self-help milieu. When people show you who they are, believe them. If your employer has shown you that they're not interested in following through on your advice, then accept that and let it go. And think to yourself, it's their organization. They're going to run it how they're going to run it and do what they want with it. If it's too painful for you to observe that, I strongly suggest you need to start looking to go somewhere else and do something else. But just standing there and railing and putting yourself through all this stress and this emotional pain, for what? It's like the people at the dentist or me when I was working in, fast food, trying to say to somebody when they came and ordered something that I thought, hey, that's a lot of food. It could have a lot of calories, or maybe it has a lot of fat in it. Are they aware of that? I mean, I can't sit there and fall out crying on the floor because someone left the restaurant and I thought they might be eating unhealthy and hurting themselves with their diet. I mean, I'm not in the capacity in that job right now to do this. And if there's such a disconnect where I think the organization at some level and we just don't have the same values, then probably it's time for me to start looking at other options. Because unless you have an incredible amount of power, how are you going to change an organization? Now, some people say, "Hey, that's what I am going to do. I'm gonna topple this leadership," and it does happen. I'm just saying that's a huge cause to take on, and unless it's like literally the most important thing in the world and you're saving lives or something, I don't get it. And you see people do this. I have seen people do this all the time. They just get so emotionally wound up in this stuff about what the employer is doing. And when I say to them, it's their business. Let them run it how you have no control what they're going to do. So they may ignore your great advice. Okay. They may have horrible, stupid ideas that ruin the whole thing. All right. It's not that I'm flippant and I don't care, but I understand where my ability to control things ends. I also understand that as an employee, I don't want to be told I have to work one job for the rest of my life with no freedom to move or change or grow or do something different. That also means that I have to accept that I can't unrealistically expect all my emotional needs to be met from a job. That's what I'm supposed to do outside of a job with some sort of friends or hobbies or animals or something. But those people at that employer, it's their organization. If my needs and their needs were all meeting at the same time, then it's a working relationship. It's a win-win. But I just think I've talked to too many people who just blow out of proportion what they think an employer can do, especially large organizations. There's 5,000 people on your job title. Do you really think that one person that's in charge of all 5,000 people knows every single one of the people's pain and stories and what their scheduling requirements are? It's not even realistic. And it doesn't mean that you're not valuable. It doesn't mean you're not important. In fact, it changes the whole dynamic. If you look at your employer as the client, it's a client experience, right? Treat them like a client. So as long as they're meeting the bare minimum needs that you agree are required by law, right? Pay you your money. I always told people when I do education sometimes, every time I got a paycheck from a client, whether I was a part-time employee or a contractor, I saw the paycheck as like a I love you letter. It was like a note saying how wonderful I was because they don't have to continue to employ me and use my services, and I don't have to stay. And seeing it as a client should free you up from all of this other emotional expectation that's just not realistic. It really isn't. And I hope that you really do consider this type of assessment, because it will change your entire career for the better. You'll be less stressed out. Everyone will think how great you are and easy to work with. Yeah, because you understand it's their organization. You'll give them everything you have and do your best. And if they choose to go some other direction with it, fine. All right. Thank you so much for being part of this two-part show. And as always, you can come to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.